Like just about everyone else that plays 40k, I decided to buy Leviathan. I mainly wanted the Marines, but the new Tyranids did pique my interest. The only problem is I had absolutely no idea how I wanted to paint them. I'd already been painting these Tau for a commission to add to an army that I previously painted, and given I was getting rid of that army, I kind of wanted to keep the scheme. So I figured I could maybe reuse it on the Tyranids. I worked through that scheme on a Termagaunt, and I did actually really like the result. But it more or less sat on my shelf and left me a little bit uninspired, probably because I'd already painted thousands upon thousands of points of 40k in essentially the same colors. So I started Googling. While Googling, I remembered that I had a whole line of color changing paints that I'd pretty much never used, and I've always really wanted to. So I started looking up these color changing beetles, and I found this one that I really liked. So I built up one of the new Von Ryan's Leapers and decided to start just throwing some color at it. This only took me about an hour to paint because I did have the objective of making a very, very quick scheme just to get through all of these bugs, because I didn't really want to spend all too much time on this army, and this is kind of what I came up with. Honestly, immediately looking at it in person, I hated it. I think the carapace looks cool with the color changing. Maybe the flesh should be more of a flat color. But while mulling over that the next day, I remembered a scheme from the 4th edition rulebook that just hit me like a freight train when I was a kid. It's this very, very flat black scheme with just little touches of very vibrant yellow. I found this pretty quickly, honestly, and turns out Phil Kelly was the original artist that did this scheme, or at least that was the artist that painted those pictures that I remember from when I was a kid. So I basically re-primed the same Leaper black and started going to town. I wanted, again, to make it a very quick scheme, so I dry brushed this guy up just through a series of greys. This was using some of the new Vallejo colors. I'm not sure if they're actually new colors or if it's just new bottles, but I honestly, any gray would work. I started with a dark, kind of almost same as Games Workshop Eshin Grey, added some white bit by bit and started going at it. I then base coated all of the claws and hooks and little sharp bits with Games Workshop's Avalanche Sunset, and with just a crappy brush I started to just pick at all of the edges of the carapace with that same color. This was done in almost a similar way to the kind of Games Workshop scheme, but instead of small, tiny little lines, I just took a big wide brush and picked at all of the edges just to create a natural, scratchy, and very punchy looking transition of color. I then just added some white to that Avalanche Sunset and did the same thing, but just in a smaller surface area. Like on these big talons, I kind of kept it closer towards the top portion of the carapace. I thought it was looking a little bit flat, so I did glaze over all of it with Games Workshop's Lamenter's Yellow. I don't know if they make these glazes anymore, to be honest, since releasing all of their contrast stuff, but it's essentially just it's a very basic yellow glaze, so any glaze would work, just to add a little bit more saturation. I then went back with the mix of Avaland and white and picked out those top edges again, I think even less than the previous white and Avaland layer. And then with mostly almost just a bone white, just picked out the very top portions of all of the armor as kind of a highlight, but also I guess maybe just a natural kind of pattern formation of color. I then filled in all of the fleshy bits with Games Workshop's contrast, I think magenta, or it was either magenta or one of the reds. Then picked out the higher portions with Mephiston red, then Evil Sun scarlet, and then adding little bits of Cadian flesh tone to that Evil Suns. I just kind of blended up the highlights to create just a gross, natural, but kind of fleshy look to it. Then taking a mid-grey with a little bit of blue in it, I went out and just with a brush picked out some of the sharper edges and kind of the middle higher portions that would catch some light on the skin just to give it a little bit more interest. I didn't film it, but I used that same grey to pick out the eyes, and then I went over the eyes with white just to make them pop. By the end of it, this is what I was left with. This guy took me about an hour to do, so it'd be very easy to just add some more time into maybe making the yellows more deliberate, or, you know, spending more time blending the black skin or the red fleshy bits. But I'm very happy with this little kind of homage to the scheme that I remembered from my childhood. I think it's the 4th edition rulebook that this featured in, but I don't have that book anymore, so I can't really check, unfortunately. But with that all said and done, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and a subscribe. I'm excited to make more videos as it's actually getting my hobby juices kind of flowing again. I haven't really painted much lately, and this has been a lot of fun. So yeah, if you're keen for more content, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.